evening. I'll call this meeting to order. This is the General Government Committee meeting of November 8th, 2023. Can we have a roll call, please?
Good evening, everyone, certainly. Councilmember Dennehy. Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember Brennan Smith. Councilmember Stein. Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
All right. We have a good hybrid meeting going with a couple of folks online and several of us here and some folks in the audience. Thanks for being here. We have two discussion items on the agenda for tonight. The first one is about the UTV ordinance and what we need to do to repeal the sunset item that was in the original ordinance that was passed. And then the other item is on the use tax ordinance update. So we'll start with the UTV ordinance, and I was saying to some folks earlier, I had to look back to try to remind myself when we passed this originally, and it was in the middle of 2022, after quite a bit of public input and discussion about how to craft this ordinance. And it was because it was something new for the community, we decided to put a sunset clause into that ordinance that was passed in mid-2022. We're coming up on that around the end of this year, so we wanted to address, again, how the ordinance is working, if there's any tweaks needed, and if we want to take that sunset clause out. So, City Administrator Stevens, shall we start with you? And
Yeah, I can start. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Councilmember Tracy. You are correct. The UTV ordinance went into effect in August of 2022 and is set to expire at the end of January of 2024. And we did do a one-year update in August of this past year. At that time, we had very, little negative feedback or, positive feedback one way or the other. Is just kind of is more status quo. I will turn in the time over to Commander Tim Walsh to talk about what they're seeing on the PD side and, registrations and things like that. And I think you may have a couple members from the public here to talk on this topic as well.
great, thanks. Commander Walsh. Is your mic on? Thank you.
Council members, we've issued in the time since this ordinance was passed 110 UTV ordinances. After the administrative costs for things such as the permit stickers and time spent processing the registrations are taken out, we have a total revenue on it of just over $5,000. So it's not a significant source of revenue for the city. That said, it's also not a draw on our resources. We have had virtually zero complaints, certainly not any increase in complaints regarding UTV issues on city streets. We have had no tickets issued for violators of this ordinance. We've had a single traffic accident that involved a UTV driver who was not at fault, and there were no injuries. From the police department's standpoint, this is not an issue either for safety or time consumption or anything else that would concern us in the community. And for that reason, if the community is interested in keeping it, I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to do so.
Councilmember Tracy, if
Sure.
I may.
Yes.
Commander Walsh, can you, I know you guys reached out to the sheriff's office as well. You mind sharing a little bit of that feedback?
The sheriff's office, as far as I know, also does not have any issue with continued UTV in the community. I believe they're considering adopting something very similar for the county. That has not come through yet to my knowledge.
Thanks. So, and we'll do this fairly informally, but any questions or discussion among council members, committee members that are here, and then we'll check with the audience too. I'm looking to see if there's any hands online. I see Amy's hand. It is hard to see in the light here. Amy, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Tracy. I had two questions. One, and no worries if you don't have it on hand, Commander Walsh, but do you have the breakdown of the number of local UTV registrants within that 110 and the number of outside registrants? I forget exactly what language we used in the ordinance.
I don't have the exact breakdown right on hand. I may be able to pull that up fairly quickly. But if I recall from when we looked at it, it was pretty close to 2/3 were Canyon City residents, and the remainder were outside residents.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then my second question is just, do you have any additional information about Fremont County Sheriff Office potentially considering something similar for the county? Because I think that would have a significant impact on the way that UTVs are used in the city and particularly in our mountain parks. So was just hoping to get a little bit more clarification if you had any more details on that. Thank you.
I do not have any further information on exactly what the county has planned with this.
So
Thank
that
you.
might be something then for us to watch and see if we need to communicate with the county if they take some steps in that direction, sounds like.
And maybe even if I may, build something into the ordinance that calls for a review if the county were to pass a similar ordinance, because I think that would have a significant impact on the city, just given, particularly given our mountain parks. But I think that that might be, rather than having kind of a review every 18 months or every year or something like that, but maybe having a review when we, if there were to be kind of that sort of dramatic change. Thanks.
Others, council members, any other questions or discussion? Not seeing any. We do have some folks in the audience. I don't, are any of you here to speak on this issue? I don't have any little slips of paper. I see heads shaking this way. Not. Okay. Got it. So, no other questions, discussion. It's really, when we think of the early work done to try to get this ordinance originally put in a form that we thought would be successful, I guess we can look back and say, well, probably all of those steps and all of those edits really helped us, so that's good to see. We are not going to take any formal action, but I assume informally we should express, we council members should express, are we ready to just refer this back then to a regular council agenda for the change in the ordinance? Does anyone need to look at that language? It's just basically removing that sunset clause.
Councilmember Tracy, it does look like Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick has his hand up.
There he is, thank you. John, yes.
Thank you. What I would suggest is that we have maybe two versions of this to consider when it comes to council. One with a trigger in it that when the county passes something or is considering passing something, that the ordinance is revisited, as well as the current version. Thank you.
Catherine, is that language that you could draft for a second version?
Yeah, I can. I guess my question is that just something council can tell the administrator that they expect to see without codifying it in the actual legislation and in the code?
That's what
If that
I'm
was
wondering.
okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
I would like to see the second ordinance and have that up for conversation. We don't necessarily know that the county is going to pass this tomorrow or even when any of us are serving on council. This is something that could happen, 8 or 10 years from now. And I think it would be helpful to have that codified as our intention based on the feedback that we have received from community members regarding their concerns about what UTV could potentially do to our community should the county pass something similar. That was a frequently raised issue of concern during the UTV conversations back in the first half of 2022. So thank you for that recommendation, Mayor Pro Tem, and I, for one, would love to see two different versions of it. Thank you.
Can we maybe talk a little bit more about what would be in that version? In other words, would the trigger be when we know the county is beginning to work on something, or is the trigger when the county has passed something? Because I see those as two different things. I don't know what it.
My
what do you two
input
think? Oh,
would
go
be
ahead,
that
Kathy.
it should be at least 6 to 8 months after, if the county were to enact it, because we need to see how it's going to work and what impacts it does or doesn't have on the community. So I don't see it as being immediately, a trigger is not right after it's passed, but would be waiting until it's been enacted for quite a while so that we can see if the good, bad, and any ugly that there might be from that.
If I may comment on that, I would suggest a slightly longer period of 6 to 12 months. And the reason for that is because UTV usage is such a seasonal issue that if the county were to pass something that took effect in September, you might not see any effect at all until May of the following year.
Right. So Catherine, does that make sense that we, at least in draft form for council review, that we'd have some kind of a trigger in one version 6 to 12 months after, if and when the county passes a similar ordinance or whatever they call their resolutions?
Yeah, it'd probably be an ordinance, but would it be okay to say no earlier than 6 months, no later than 12? Is that all right with the group-ish? Okay.
And we can certainly, and will, I'm sure, discuss this further when it comes before council. Anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, you can, of course, you can review it anytime you want. So this is
Right.
just Skype. So,
True.
okay, sorry, Councilmember Tracy.
No, you're good, thanks. If nothing else on that topic, then we can move to our other topic for the evening, which is in regard to the use tax ordinance update. Should I start with you, City Administrator
I will
Stevens?
hand this one directly to Finance Director Tammy Nordick.
Great, thanks.
So before you have the change to the use tax municipal code, what we are asking for is to have clarification for the audit period, who can actually do the audit, and then the addition of a filing period. Currently, we do not have a requirement for filing, so we would like to have a quarterly filing placed in there. We did send out 157 letters to invite people to tonight's meeting. 103 of those invitations were to individuals who had not been filing, and 54 of those were to current filers. So that was one request of council to make sure that we did notify the individuals or the businesses that could be impacted by this. So we did send out that notice as well. And we did not hear anything from anybody on that.
And just for clarifying at this meeting, I know we talked about this a little bit at a different meeting, but just maybe say a little bit more about who this tax applies to, what kinds of businesses get the letter or receive the letter.
Do you want to handle that one?
Yes, it's kind of not a whole lot of businesses that fall under use tax. It would fall under like restaurants, say, that have food that they give away or give to the employees, food that was bought at wholesale, and then not sold and collected sales tax on, like grocery stores that throw away or give away food that's expired. It could be like banks if they have, or whoever does some kind of promotional gifts that they bought those at wholesale and didn't pay sales tax on it, then the use tax would be due. Just kind of that type of stuff.
Do you have anything, Catherine, that you think we need to add as to say who is responsible to file those?
No, yeah, it is a pretty fairly limited group of people. You know, it's not like the sales tax application. So it's a pretty small group of people. I think you covered most of what would happen and most of the businesses that would apply to, like on a regular basis. There's obviously one-off use tax impositions, like the motor vehicle and things like that, and those people wouldn't be subject to quarterly reporting requirements.
So no other general categories then of business? Yeah, in just a moment. Well, we'll get to you. Thanks. So council members, any questions, comments on what's being proposed here for change in our code? I'm looking to see if I do see Councilmember Hamrick's hand. I have to really look even with my glasses. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So we expect what this ordinance does is creates a duty to file this quarterly. Is that an appropriate, if we're not talking about a large sum of money here, is that an appropriate time frame? Just a little bit concerned about a burden that this may place on some small businesses.
Prior to us going state collected with sales tax, businesses were required to file use tax on a monthly basis. So I think having the quarterly will not be, I think should be the minimum. I do not feel that we should do an annual return. Even though, yes, it is a small amount of businesses, a lot of times it's, if you know you have something coming up quarterly, then you just kind of, it stays more so on your mind than, oh, it's once a year, now I got to go back and figure out what I did for the entire year. So I think administratively, for a business, it would probably be easier quarterly.
Thank you for that.
Great. I'm looking, I don't see Amy's hand up, but if you need one, yes, City Administrator Stevens.
And I just wanted to clarify for the record, this is an existing tax. This is just language to clarify the process for administering.
Exactly, not a new tax. So, council members, I don't see any more questions or hands from you. We have some folks in the audience. If you want to address this issue, would ask that you come up to the microphone and give us your name and.
My name is Tom Coleman. I'm with Coleman Auto Supply. There's 3 owners. One of the others is Mike back there, and we're a family-run operation, 1130 Royal Gorge Boulevard. My question is trying to find a clear-cut who needs to report, who doesn't need to report, and why should they report, okay? When I got my notification that was mailed out saying, you know, did you ever do any reporting, and are you still in business? I called to say just what exactly is this tax and how should I be handling it? And I never got a clear-cut answer. There's a website that I was referred to that was non-operational at the time, and so I would like to just see something in writing that says who needs to report, why they need to report. I'm hearing giving out gifts of food. That's nothing to do with me, but we do supply door prizes to different organizations. We make monetary donations, so on and so on down the line. We like to operate in our community, but would I need to be taxed on that? I mean,
Right.
that's my
Well,
question.
thanks for coming, because you've come to the right place to get your questions answered.
There you
and
go.
I'll have our finance director then perhaps answer those questions for you.
So
Thank you.
if you're giving door prizes away that are not from your inventory that you purchased at wholesale. Like if you went and purchased something at Walmart and you paid sales tax on it, there's no use tax due on it. But if you give away something that you purchased at wholesale and no sales tax has been paid on it, then you are responsible for that sales tax in the form of a use tax. That's when it would trigger it. So if you gave away, let's say you had a torque wrench that you gave away as a door prize and you had bought it at wholesale, that's what you would need to pay essentially the use tax on the value of that item. Of what you had, so if you bought it, if you were able to buy it at wholesale for, let's say, $10, you would owe tax on the $10.
What part of donation to a nonprofit
So if it's
would have to be taxed?
but if you had given it, as you mentioned, as a door prize, so is that something at your business, you're doing an open house, or you're doing something where you're giving it to a random customer as a door prize, or, okay, that's when that would apply.
See what I mean about clarification?
Correct.
Okay.
But if you are doing I'm not sure how a donation to a nonprofit would be. Catherine, do you have a thought on that?
So looking at your code, so it is a little, it's not the easiest thing to handle. I'll fully admit that. But so if you purchase something at wholesale, like Tammy described, and you donated it to a local nonprofit, and let's say in exchange for that, they gave you kind of almost like free advertising to promote your business, and that was your purpose in giving that free thing away, and you didn't pay sales tax on it because you got it at a wholesale, then you'd have to pay use tax. If you make a donation that doesn't involve the promotion of your business or your sales and that kind of thing, and you make a donation, there is another portion of the code that applies to, for purposes of goodwill. And so it might fall under that as well, even if you're not doing it to promote your business. So it's possible that and I understand you're thinking that it's a donation and, it's to a nonprofit, and I completely understand where you're coming from. But that's the way the code is currently written. Removing that is a much different conversation than we're having this evening. But, that's the way the code's written out. Now, if you give money to a nonprofit, that is not taxed. You can give $20 to a nonprofit and there's no taxation on money. So I wanted to make that clear because that was one of your examples. So, the nonprofit is the tax exempt entity. The person donating is not necessarily exempt from tax, depending on what the law is applied to the tax.
As we proceed through this and as it eventually goes to city council agenda, we might want to get some of that language out in the public, because it is a little confusing. In a sense, a use tax, as I understand it, is kind of like a sales tax, but being paid in a different way. But it may not be 100% clear to all of us in the community about how this is supposed to work in the past or present or future. So, yeah, Councilman Worthington.
Being a member of the Canyon Car Club, let's put it into perspective and see if we both are understanding this correctly. If you were to give that torque wrench as a door prize to our car show, and somebody won it, then fine, you've done this, it says it's from Coleman Auto Supply and everything that way, you would still owe technically the tax on that. But if it was like a $10 gift certificate to Coleman Auto Supply, then it would not be a use tax, because when that person comes in to use that gift certificate, they're going to be paying the sales tax. So does that help at all to explain a little bit?
It does in a way, but you know, we're using our money to buy the torque wrench. It's the same thing as anything else, okay?
Yes and no. The thing is if you bought it wholesale, you did not pay tax on it because you would not collect tax until you sell it to a customer.
So it's all about taxes.
Yeah, of course, we got to get it one way or another.
Let's get it out there. It's all about collection.
Yes.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like if you don't pay for it up front, then you got to pay for it on the end side of it, so.
And Mr. Coleman, could I get you to move a little closer to the microphone?
I'm
Just
sorry. Yes.
folks
Okay.
may be
There you
listening
go.
online.
Okay, well, that explains a lot. Not satisfactorily, but that it does explain a lot. And I would appreciate, you know, yes, us getting some clarification and some what would you say, written statements out there as to what we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to be doing it,
Right.
and why.
This will give us a good opportunity for a little refresher course for all of us about how this works.
Yeah, that's good.
I do see that Councilmember Hamrick has his hand up.
Thank you, Councilmember Tracy. You know, for sure, we don't want somebody to have to hire a tax lawyer to be able to donate a torque wrench.
Yeah.
But would it be possible for us, I guess this is a question for City Administrator Stevens and Finance Director Nordyke, would it be possible to get some type of policy statement or guidance that can sit behind the regulation, not necessarily something that we put in code, but have a policy that we can refer people to or send to people that may be subject to this tax? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, you know, if we're referring people to I'm assuming the website was not one of our web pages?
It
Okay.
should have been to the municipal code.
Okay.
Which talks about the transactions. But as we all know, sometimes municipal code isn't the easiest thing to read. We could
put
come
together a
up
fact sheet.
with like a FAQ, is tax due, is not tax due, and we could use that item, you know, as an example. You know, because it is about whether or not sales tax was paid at the time the purchase was made. If sales tax was not paid at the time the purchase was made, and that item is converted to personal use or given away, then a use tax is owed on it. And so we can come up with some
Well, I think-
examples.
Being a Canyon Car Club member, you're familiar with a lot of stuff that you saw at the last car show that was out there on the tables. We being part of that. But we didn't have any clue as to what we were supposed to be doing about that.
I think that's
That's
a live and
understandable.
learn too, and, you know, because you haven't owned the business that long, and so learning all of the ins and outs of something like that, trust me, every day. And so it's not meant to be, the letters and so forth, I'm sure, are not meant to be punitive, it's to be more informative and just give us, you know, hate to say this way, a pound of flesh in the sense of just what's due to the government based on what you bought or whatever or gave away. So I think I've learned a lot just listening to this tonight, but I think it helps us all to, and you especially in the business, to be able to understand what is and isn't taxable, so to
Right.
speak.
Yeah,
Okay?
there's just a few
Councilmember
rules out there, I'm
Schmischer
sure.
has her hand up. You're still muted.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tracy. My question was about Section 3D. It states it shall, and this is a new portion that is being proposed to be added. It shall be the duty of every person, firm, or corporation liable to the city for any use tax to file a quarterly use tax return. Such return shall be due to the city, and shall be due even if the return amount is zero. So I'm just wondering, could part of that FAQ let people know if they are a person, firm, or corporation that might be liable that would need to file this even if it's zero? And would there be, you know, do not need to file this if it's zero until you trigger it the first time, and then, once you have a use tax, or I'm just a little bit concerned that we might be putting a pretty big burden on a bunch of businesses and a bunch of people to file these statements when they don't have any use tax ever. So I'm curious as to how we're interpreting that, and if we could make that a little bit clearer, either in the code or in this FAQ document that we're talking about. Thanks.
And one reason we wanted to have that filing period in there is because right now it is very difficult to see who has actually been filing use tax and who has not. Right now we can compare who the filers were before we went state collected for sales tax, but we can't run anything to say, oh, there's a missing return, because we're not requiring people to file. And that's why we were asking for that zero return. But yes, we can put something in there that, if you are involved in these types of activities, then use tax is due, and there is a return due on that. And if we do have that quarterly filing and we run a report that says that there's a missing return, and we send out a letter that says, oh, you didn't file for this quarter, it could be, the business could have a simple phone call back to us and say, we didn't, we had an activity once for the year and that's not something we typically do, and we can try to make notes of those things.
Yeah, I think that'll be important. Thanks, Mr. Coleman. Was that all that you had?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to speak about the use tax change? I see no's. Don't want to go there, right? Let's see, I'm looking to see council members Hamrick and Schmischer. I don't see hands up any further. Council member Worthington, anything? I don't think of anything else. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
Thank you. I did just have one more question. Attorney Sellers had mentioned that it was defined in our code what is required, and I just wanted to clarify, is this something that we are determining at a city level as to when individuals need to provide a use tax? I would imagine this is something that is determined at a state level, and we could also have this conversation at another juncture, because I know that we're getting kind of deeper into the weeds than perhaps this ordinance was intended to. But I do want to provide that clarification to folks if it is a simple answer.
This is.
Yeah, I think it is. So the transactions that are subject to use tax are a state determined, city determined, my apologies, city determined list of activities. Mm-hmm. So, for example, and there's state use tax too. So there's another layer of use tax that we don't have anything to do with. We don't get involved in. So, for example, as you all know, there's use tax on the purchase of construction and building materials. That's the big one, right? And so the city can decide if it doesn't want to tax that anymore and repeal that from its code. Once you repeal it, you have to go to the voters to put it back. So that's the only thing. But it is city driven. Because use tax is not like sales tax where you're following state law and state law exemptions and all of that. So it's city driven.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think it would be something that might be worth kind of a broader conversation at a future general government meeting in terms of what the city currently has in its code and maybe some of the historical context for why those decisions were made, thinking particularly about some of the examples that Mr. Coleman raised around donations to nonprofits. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And, that's a good thought. And I guess since we're a home rule city, a lot of that we can figure out how we want it to be other than what state law tells us it needs to be in terms of new taxes and so forth. But I do wonder if we would want to talk at some point about maybe, I hesitate to even say, I was going to say exempting a certain level of donation, but then that brings problems too. So maybe there is just a future rich conversation about all that.
We can add that to a future general government meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Other questions, comments on what's being proposed for this use tax ordinance update? I'm looking for, I don't see any hands. There's no hands in the audience. Sounds like we've got some pretty good direction here in terms of providing some more informational context when it comes to council. Anything else for tonight? Seeing nothing, I think we're ready to adjourn the meeting at 6:35. Oh, your hand up, Amy? Oh, okay. Oh, that's a goodbye. We adjourn this meeting at 6:35 p.m. Thanks.